Hello there. Let's see if anybody pops up from here on my own at this stage. Hello, Susan. Do let me know if you can see and, of course, hear me. I'm getting 27. Tish, Dawn, Sarah, Catherine, KCM. Hello, Catherine. Thank you for letting me know I'm coming through. Fantastic. Good. Hi, Leslie. Thank you for date stamping that. I knew it was one of the last ones that I did. I have an idea. Sorry, this isn't to the comment. I think I put on the Facebook post. I think this is one of the last tours I did with Hago, and I'm reasonably sure. I know the last one I did was in York. It was Dick Turpin, but I think this was the last one that I did. Hello, Smudge. The last one that I did away from York, if that kind of makes sense. So I think this was the penultimate. I could be wrong, but it was certainly one of the final ones. So not been back since. So even though you obviously saw that at the time, I thought it'd be nice. Hello, Polly, to get back here. And for those who are on Sunday, apologies for the Wi-Fi. I'll get that sorted out. I've got the footage. I've just been tied up this week, so I'll do it at home with Casey. I'm here. Hang in there. I'm sure I'll be with you momentarily. So Herbie, hello Herbie. So I'll be producing that tour sorry, very soon, maybe over the weekend or early next week. We'll have the at home from the Leeds West Indian Carnival, which will offer. Got some good footage. Had to wait very, very long, delayed. It was an hour and 40 minutes, I think, after it was meant to be when they finally got there. So it's been a while. Hello, Sandy. Just went to tour of Windsor with Natalie. Did you see the Queen then? But of course, I want to see the Queen. You know, also Queen Camilla, I suppose. But good. I hope it was a good tour there with Natalie. And hello, Michelle. Good to see you. Sarah Painter's on, and Tish and Catherine. Brilliant. Hi, KCM from Tennessee. Lovely to have you with us here in Yorkshire. We're going live in just a moment or two, and we'll look forward to it. So, has anybody been to Haworth? Do let me know if any of you have actually been here in person. If so, I hope it brings up some happy memories. I was at York a couple of weeks ago with the Van Gogh. Well, Lane, you didn't. You should have got in touch and we could have had a cup of coffee. But next time you're around the area, that'd be lovely. MB's here. Oh, fantastic. Lovely. Nice quiff. Thank you for that. It's slightly wind-driven, I think. My hair was fairly wet when I went out this afternoon, so I think that it's wind-assisted is that one there. So, Expo was great. Not me. Just with you, John. Tish says, okay. So, I'll take it. I mean, it's one of those places that obviously people, often are coming to England's North Country. It'll be sort of fairly high up on their list of places they want to go. So, yes, my mum lived nearby, so many times has Lynn. Fantastic. Always fun to see John's tours, to share them with you. Thank you, Bluebird. So one or two of you would have been, if Dawn's on, I think Dawn has been. Dawn's there, yeah. Dawn was here as a young child, but not in recent years. So, now, this is going to be 4G dependent, but I'm going to try and introduce some footage along the way, inspired by Mark in Amsterdam. So I'm going to try that today. Try to tagcast it works okay. So we'll see if that works. If it gets stuck, don't worry. I'll put them on the tours. Rosemary came on a coach tour years ago. So did they kick you out the coach at the bottom of the hill and have you walk up, or did the coach go do all the heavy lifting for you and get you up the hillside? So we're right at the bottom. It's a bit of a nightmare tour for me. I'll be out of breath, but such is the price that I pay. So here we are then. 6 o'clock is upon us. So good evening, good morning, good afternoon, welcome wherever you are. Joining me here today in Haworth. And Haworth, of course, is, hello Grace, world famous for being the home of the Brontes. But of course, it's got much more to it than just the Brontes. I'm going to hopefully share some of the history and the background of the village with you today. But of course, the Brontes is probably the reason most people will kind of come here, make a beeline for these religious kind of, not religious, literary, what's the word? Not crusades, what's the word I'm looking for? When you go on a long journey. Anyway, it'll come in there. And so, yeah, the Brontes kind of drive people here, but obviously there's a lot more to it than just the Brontes. So I do hope you'll enjoy this beautiful village. So Cheryl normally comes on the train to Haworth, and that's where we're starting now. So let's spin it without further pilgrimage. That's what I'm looking for. Brain went blank there for a minute. So we're right outside the super cute Haworth station, and I'll bring you up onto the railway bridge so you can sort of see the inside of the station. Thanks, station. Now, for over almost 100 years, the railway here from Keighley to Oxenhope served the mills and the people of the Worth Valley. So it's called the Worth Valley, the River Worth running through it. So consequently, this was used, this railway, to transport mill workers from their kind of remote villages on the hillside to the factories, the textile mills in Bradford. And the line that it's built on was built between 1864 and 1866. It opened up the following year in 1867. And so it was part of the Bradford, Leeds and Skipton line. Very cute. And eventually brought by the KWVR company. And in 1924, the Worth Valley became part of the London, Midland and Scottish Railway. And then obviously when the railway was nationalised after World War II, it became part of British Railways. Now there's a kind of super sort of steep gradient from Keighley, which is the beginnings of this rail, which is a real kind of challenge for locomotives ever since it opened in 1867. So not all kind of steam trains are equal. You kind of need super powered ones to also kind of get up these gradients. So, you know, a sound in this area that's very common is hearing these steam engines really have to work hard to get up these sort of steep sides of the valley. So you get great clouds of steam. When I was driving over this afternoon, I could see from about 10 miles away, you know, a train obviously going down this line, because they really billow out vast sums of steam. And so many of the woolen mills obviously this served originally, that once stood, have closed, they've been demolished, but a few kind of remain as reminders the textile industry was the reason why the line was built. So if you go on the journey that Cheryl was talking about from Keighley Station all the way to Oxenhope, you will see very many, well not very many, but you'll see a number of mill buildings, but many of them now of course have become residential. So I'll show you the sunny side of the valley here. Need lots of puff. So do I actually, Susan, and I might maybe run out of puff. So if I run out of puff, I've got my asthma spray with me, and I'll stop for a minute, but hopefully you can kind of see that this is very much kind of built into the side of the valley, as is typical of so much kind of West Yorkshire, where you can get long, straight, linear villages, because essentially it's the valley bottom that kind of follows the path. So you tend to have the top side, but you also have, you know, a sunny side and a dark side. We've talked about those before, and of course living on the sunny side of the valley is a darn sight nicer of the two. So in 1962, everyone's favourite killjoy, Dr. Beeching, scheduled this little line for closure, on the basis that, of course, by this time the textiles mills were sort of closing down, not least because obviously we were kind of losing the battle in competition with the cheap production methodology in the Far East. Now then, let me just try and see if I've got it for you. I'll see if I can bring... So, because you can't see it today, I brought a little video of what it's like to arrive here by steam trains. Hopefully you are now seeing this line, and you'll get a little glimpse in a minute of Haworth Station. So this is the way that most people like to arrive here, is on this vintage train, which is now obviously run by Preservation Society. I think since the 1970s they brought it back. Brilliant setup, you know, absolutely committed volunteers. They really kind of you know, treat this in a beautiful manner. So this is the way you should arrive, as we did here coming into the station. So do let me know if that video has kind of come through okay for you. I hope so. And I'll just get rid of that if we can, if I remember how to do it. It's my problem. I get all this tech and then forget how to get rid. But there we go. There we go. So did that? Were you all able to see a video then? Was that playing? So do let me know if that kind of came through okay. I'm not entirely sure what you saw at your end. How wonderful. Fantastic. Yeah, super fun of Christmas. So really, really cute. In fact, I think they're doing Christmas Carol on the lines here. So it's a 5-mile journey up the hillside, kind of on the way across. But it's kind of slow, and the cool thing is you're encouraged to kind of get off at the villages. And of course, one of the, you know, principal attractions, of course, on this line as well is those are old enough to remember, which I think is most of us, let's be honest, is The Railway Children, the famous movie with Bernard Cribbins and Jenny Agutter and so forth, was filmed on this line in the 1960s. So Oxenhope Station is the famous Railway Children station, and it's pretty much unchanged. So if you want to get a real hit, of childhood nostalgia, Oxenhope Station is the kind of place to be. So I'm about to carry off to a last lingering nostalgic look at the railway, and then it's a fine reminder of our industrial heritage. So whilst today obviously it's a really cute way of getting to Haworth and seeing the beautiful sights here, it was once for the mill workers to be. There's a commuter line basically, and it's also mentioned this kind of countryside and the landscape obviously in all the novels of the Brontes. So BR did their thing, they closed it down, but they couldn't actually close it down because people valued it to such a degree that they found a way to bring it back. So I think that's quite sort of fitting, really. 2 fingers up to Dr. Beeching and the technocrats. The people said no, it's staying. And so, like a lot of these things, it's now run by volunteers, and as a result of that, it's wonderful, it's clean, it's functional, it works great. Hats off to the volunteers involved. They do a sterling job. And so if you're coming over this part of the world, don't drive. Get a train to Keighley and then pick up the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway, and it'll bring you here in style. And but my trick is, don't put your head out the window, because unless you've realised this before, they're very mucky things, coal burning steam trains, and you might come back in with a black face. So there's my tip for you. So let's head up now towards the main street, towards the parsonage. And so it's all run by a Preservation Society. They kind of club together to sort of keep that running. So it is absolutely, I agree, Dawn, keeping traditions alive is really important, particularly industrial heritage as well, because obviously industrial heritage is kind of quite democratic, isn't it, insofar as it's what we all would have used, in our forefathers, would have just used these. And of course, we're just walking up this hillside here. Don't forget we're seeing the cobbles, very traditional surfacing. And this was to help pony and traps, horse and carriages, in the wet to get purchased. Because obviously before motorised vehicles, everything was delivered by horse and cart, or horse and carriage. And so consequently, the ability to be able to have some traction in wet, slippy weather is very, very important. So that's why this surfacing was created such. So the horses didn't get freaked out, and the ponies, and they could step up with confidence, taking their heavy loads up the slopes. So a very good bank for pleasure. A bit bumpy, I would think, Dawn, but as you say, if we just spin and give you a look down, if it's got a nice covering of snow and ice, I think you get a rattle on. Fiona W loves being back here. Fantastic. Well, Fiona's a North Country gal, so I'm sure she'll recognise any kind of similarities with wherever you're Northumberland at the minute, aren't you? But anyway, so, but like the Dales, Stone, we're not too far away really from the Yorkshire Dales. Maybe 15 miles or so as the crow flies from Skipton. It's a lovely evening sunshine. The guys down here enjoying the weather, playing some bowls, and let's have a kind of walk through the park on our way up to the bottom of the village. And this park, beautiful sort of central park, dates from the 1920s, and there's an awful lot of parks in England that date from the 1920s for the reason, I guess you can obviously think about it really, a lot of people coming back from the First War very damaged, both physically, obviously in terms of loss of limbs and so forth, but perhaps even more significantly psychologically damaged. And so places of peace, for convalescence, relaxation and so forth became incredibly important. Thank you, Leslie. I think that these civic parks, which are now of course probably under a great deal of threat, it's very difficult when there's so many pressures on the public purse. I often talk about this, sort of competing for funds against the cases you can't argue with, of course. But nonetheless, I do think that they play an incredibly sort of important part in our kind of public life, and it's all kind of democratic. Everybody gets to have a bit of a park, don't they? So they're very well kept. They have the islands, the shrubberies, everything. So you can really understand, can't you? I think after coming back and people being in the trenches and the noise and the chaos and everything that they've seen, to be able to come and spend time sort of communing with nature, enjoying the wildlife, flowers, the bandstand here, so the concerts, in the afternoons. I think it's kind of, you know, you could understand, can't you, John, how that was a very important part of our kind of national recovery, if you like, from this trauma of sending all these young men, and of course the women as well, going as nurses and being exposed to tremendous, terrible, conditions as well. So cobblestones in Portuguese, paralelepípedos. That's an amazing word. Thank you. That's definitely word of the day. I don't know how I probably mangled that blue bit, but that is an absolute stormer of a word. I love that. So that definitely gets thumbs up. So see, the park's lovely. So this park, the Bowling Green Ballet, in 1937. So it's all been around for sort of quite a while, but it's lovely and just mature now. And so I think it really gives a nice sort of pause in terms of the sort of space between getting off the train and then coming up the slope into what is often very, very busy. Perhaps won't be too busy right now because it's a bit later on, but what can be an incredibly busy high street. So it just gives you a little bit of a pause before we go through. And as I say, I love this style, the rockeries and everything. It's just really nice, and obviously a clean pair of lungs when places were of course a lot of industrial smoke in the past. And so Rosemary said about where places where people go in the lockdowns, absolutely right, they played a vital role, didn't they, particularly for those who wouldn't have gardens, much outdoor space themselves, to come out and just to sort of be at one, really. So I know it sounds a bit corny, it's a bit sort of hippie-ish, but that idea of kind of being in the present, in the moment, taking a moment to look at the flowers, to watch the insects, look at the birds, listen to the birds. I think it's just so important. And Leslie, you're absolutely right. The volunteers now, I think, that are making the difference. And if this is run by volunteers, the planting, they're doing a lovely job. Is this Cosmos, Rebecca? I forget. I never remember which is which, but they're looking lovely. Nature, best form of therapy, says Polly, and I'm really across that. I think particularly the older you get, when we're young, we want excitement, don't we? We want drama and things coming at thick and fast. But I think the older you get, peace, and just solitude, at time to have your thoughts, provided those thoughts are positive, of course. It's just really healthy, isn't it? Of just taking time just to see the world around us, and whether that is a spectacular mountain backdrop or just a modest planted, border in a park. There's beauty everywhere if we go a little bit slower and just take the time to seek it out. So Cheryl's gladioli. Gladioli is a magnificent plant, isn't it? Wonderful, wonderful colours and flowers. So big thumbs up for the park, and it sort of forms part of the western slope, by the way, the valley. So I don't know if you've kind of noticed. If I can pan back now, you can sort of see we've gradually been going upwards. I think I've done really rather well, my breathing, it has to be said. We're kind of now on the ascent, we're on the way up towards the top. So, the park sort of runs gradually down back to the east. But we are now, thank you, Diane, that's lovely, very kind of you, thank you. So we're right at the bottom of the village of Haworth, and just to kind of, for those that aren't kind of familiar with where we are, so lovely old historic Methodist chapel, Baptist chapel in front of us. Haworth is a village in the city of Bradford. So Bradford is the biggest sort of settlement near here, and it's about 3 miles southwest of Keighley, which is where the trains are. It's about 10 miles west of Bradford and 10 miles east of Colne, the Colne, spelled C-O-L-N-E, Colne in Lancashire. That's in the Colne Valley, so far from the kind of the Pennines. So, but we're right up, obviously, on the top as well. So it's a wild land. Now we are on Rawdon. Is it Rawdons or Rawsons, the famous family? I think they're the Rawsons. So, no, just one more minute. Have a look at the flowers just before we sort of head up, and that's lovely. I think we can cross with safety now. So yeah, so Haworth is first mentioned. The first mention, name this now, obviously don't forget things are often called something else, is it's first mentioned a settlement in a document in 1209. So, about land rights. And it may refer to a hedged enclosure or a hawthorn enclosure. So Haworth Hawthorn. I only pronounce it differently. So you'd think it would be Haworth, wouldn't you? Based on Hawthorn, but we think it's the same kind of root sort of derivation there. And the name was recorded as Haworth, spelled Howorth, so like it is today, but with an O rather than an A at the beginning, in a 1771 map. So it's been Haworth for good of us. Thank you, Cheryl. So I'm just going to go across so we just start to see just the charm of these buildings. Before we go to the reality of what it was like to live here, not charming at all. I think you'll agree, this really is just such an evocative, beautiful kind of place. So obviously home to the famous Bronte sisters. So Haworth's like an undisputed literary mecca, and you get attracting visits from all over the world. So obviously you've got a historic cobbled main street that we're starting to walk up now. You've got the iconic parsonage we're going to see in a few minutes, and the rolling moors behind that we'll see before we finish. And the kind of picturesque proportions of this Airedale village kind of exude a vintage charm. You feel, I think, really like you've stepped into another era. I just kind of spin you around, you start to get a sense of the other valley side, so we'll keep going back to this shot as we kind of go up. And Catherine B's been here as well, so she knows what special place is. And have you sketched here, Catherine? I dare say there'll be lovely. It's a lovely B&B just there, looking for a sleeping house. Sleeping house. Very bleak in winter. Yeah, well, hold that thought. We're about to go into bleakness. So the biography that Mrs. Gaskell wrote in 1857, just after Charlotte died, was largely based on letters written between Charlotte and her friend, whose name was Ellen Nussey. And as a result of this, the account is kind of somewhat partial, inaccurate, and led to a number of libel suits. But it cemented the kind of growing fascination in the public eye with these sisters. So Mrs. Gaskell had set out to answer the question of how these three Yorkshire sisters could have written such outrageous novels. Now, we think of them now, obviously, the Brontes as being sort of just great canons of the English literature. But in their time, Rochester House, after Mr. Rochester from Jane Eyre, of course, they were extraordinarily controversial. We'll come back to that a little bit later on. But Mrs. Gaskell had her own answer. She firmly believed it was a kind of direct result of growing up in this isolated village on the top of the moors. Isn't it just lovely? So Patrick Bronte, the father of the Bronte children, was appointed to the perpetual curacy of Haworth in 1820. Now, on paper, this was a promotion for him. It was a step up in his career. However, a dispute between local residents and the vicar of Bradford meant they actually only ever received a portion of the salary due. And so as a result of this, the continent lived in a state of genteel poverty. Cottages now, many of which will be hold-lets now, were built for textile workers. They are not commodious, they're not very large, they're not... I'll keep walking on. If you get a bit of buffering, it's just the area. I'll keep moving and hopefully it'll improve. They're not kind of generous. So the idea that we might have from Wuthering Heights, that this was a place that was kind of, a place of nature and of outdoors and expanses, it's kind of misleading. I mean, obviously where Wuthering Heights is believed to be set up at Top Withens, that certainly is like that. But that isn't to say that that was the norm. The norm in reality was this was an industrial place. So I'm just going to talk about, hopefully, I've kind of walked through, and obviously keeping moving helps with buffering, but as you can see, we are in a high up isolated place, so if it buffers a little bit, I'll just keep moving and hopefully that will improve. So, am I okay now? Nobody's saying anything, so I'm just going to walk on. So, we talked about kind of poverty here. A little bit, not too bad, though. Fantastic. So, in 1850, Patrick Bronte, the father of the sisters, and the local parish priest, invited a chap called Benjamin Herschel Babbage to investigate the village's high early mortality rate, which had led to all but one of his 6 children, including the writers Emily and Anne Bronte, dying by the age of 31. So Babbage's inspection uncovered deeply insanitary conditions. There was no sewers. Excrement flowed down the Haworth streets. Waste from the slaughterhouses and pigsties had been held for months in fenced-in areas. The accommodation was overcrowded, poorly ventilated, and a poorly oxygenated and overcrowded graveyard. Here's a spook shop. where the water supply was tainted. It is absolutely mesmerising when you think about it. We can't always get our head around it, but that was the situation here. So far from this being an idyllic spot that we can look at now and look at how beautiful it was, this was an absolute slum. It was something to be held. Patty, well, today it took me 2 hours to drive because the traffic was very bad. Normally about an hour and a half's drive. Attractions being the Heritage Railway and the Bronte Parsonage Museum. And in Haworth, there are, of course, tea rooms, souvenirs, antiquarian bookshops we've already seen, a gallery in front of us here, restaurants, pubs and hotels. It is absolutely a kind of collection of sort of wonderful places to visit. But as I say, these are places that have been transformed from former residences of the textile mill workers. So we'll get artisan pies. It really is absolutely delightful. I'll just show you the lovely flowers over on this side here, and really colourful. So hopefully the buffering is slowing down and we'll just get you these flowers. So I'll just stop for a minute and you just let me know if I'm coming through. I missed John's answer because I was buffering. Yeah, can you hear me now, Patty? Can just give me a little thumbs up if you can hear me now, because obviously I'm never quite aware of precisely at what moments the signal drops a little bit. But as your message is coming through, it would suggest that there's some form of kind of connection. So I'm hoping that you're seeing me and hearing me. Just amazing flowers, lovely. So. It says a good now, fantastic. So basically, yeah. So what I was kind of reflecting on it is obviously today you've got this, lovely eclectic mix. Bars, restaurants, antiquarian bookshops, record shops. Cool stuff to really kind of while away an afternoon, a really pleasurable kind of time to sort of spend here. And it's about tourism, but historically this was a place of kind of textile and industrial employees. So just kind of coming up the hill. The pub in front of us, the Black Bull. I'm sure many of you will be aware, but there was, well, there's actually 6 Bronte children, but there's 4 that make it to adulthood. The 4th being the brother, Branwell Bronte. And Branwell was another literary talent. Some believe he is sort of a great undiscovered Bronte. Others appreciate it, may well feel like it, but we're about to talk about the church. It's lovely too. It's a glorious kind of village, and it's a Villette. Is that a last novel, I think, by Charlotte? No, the village shop there. So obviously this is a base for exploring Bronte country, and there's a lot of places nearby here. I mean, obviously they weren't born here, born at Thornton, about 5 miles away. Lots of places where novels are set, you can go and visit. But obviously this is definitely, the kind of mecca of the place. So, whilst you are here, it feels like you're very much in the middle of the countryside. You're still very near to Bradford and Leeds. So the Brontes were born in Thornton, near Bradford. But they wrote most of their novels while living here at Haworth, at the parsonage, where their father was the parson of the Church of St Michael and All Angels. A lovely name for a church there. So this is the Black Bull, where you frequently find Branwell in all sorts of cities. I like Kirill from Russia. So St Michael's Church we're about to see was largely rebuilt in the 1870s and was completed in 1881. So it's somewhat kind of different to the church where Patrick Bronte was appointed in 1820. And this church was paid for by public subscription, a mix of contributors including wealthy mill owners and also fans of the Bronte sisters. So I'm going to try, now again, I don't know obviously about the internet connection here, so this may or may not work, but I've got some footage from inside the church. Did the Bronte mom? Yes, I'm going to come on to that, Leslie. She absolutely did die young. So he brought the children up without his wife. So I'll come to that in just a minute. But let me just try and see if I can bring you footage from within the church. Let's have a look. That is that one, I think. Yeah. And hopefully this will play. So you're looking at the interior now of the church. There's Belgian glass at the end, very, very colourful. And each of these windows are kind of funded by different families, the kind of wealthy sort of mill owners. The bell tower is the oldest part of the church, and that dates back to sort of 1481. We'll talk about that in a minute. Patrick had the tower raised so he could put new bells in there. So the east window and the rail, which is just on the other side of where I'm looking here, were all sort of put in by a mill-owning family called the Merrills. There's a stunning alabaster pulpit as well. But what's on here that you're going to see in just a minute is the Bronte chapel, because the Bronte, even though they kind of extended and rebuilt this, they didn't disturb the graves of the family. So consequently, a bit at the kind of the rear of the church, we're going to enter into in a minute. There are, see, hold that thought. There are. So this is the chapel we're about to see here, and you'll see a little thing on the ground here saying this is the place where they say Charlotte and Emily are interred. So they were in a kind of lead casket, so they weren't disturbed. They kind of built it round, so they're buried in front of the altar, but because they're rebuilding it now, it looks like sort of towards the edge rather than the centre. So the coffins weren't disturbed, and they're in the original places. So the Bronte Chapel was created in the 60s, kind of above the burial space, and the entire family is here, apart from Anne, who's buried in Scarborough. And you can see this kind of memorial is placed in the location of where the family pew would have been, where they were all sat during church services, led, of course, by Patrick Bronte. And in a moment, so like a party, so this is silent here, you're obviously hearing people in the street. The table here was, Charlotte was married at the table. The table is 17th century, was used for communion in the old church. So that was when Charlotte married the curate, the assistant priest to Patrick Bronte. That was where they took their vows. And in this chapel you've got, obviously there's the stones you can see. So Maria was the mother. We're going to talk about her in just a minute. And, we've got all the Brontes that are interred within the old church. So, they're all there, basically, within that church. So you've got Maria, you've got Patrick, you've got Bramwell, you've got Charlotte, you've got Emily. So basically all the clan. The only one to say that isn't in there is Anne Bronte, who's buried up in Scarborough on the North Yorkshire coast. So it's a lovely setting, and obviously it's shut now, so I couldn't bring you in, but obviously it was worth doing a bit of filming in there so you could see the interior. So hats off to Mark. So there's also some bits and pieces of kind of memorabilia. You're about to see Patrick Bronte's Bible in here, copy of the marriage certificate of Charlotte, becomes Charlotte Nichols, I believe. I think that's what she was called. And there's a poem by Charlotte on there, which I haven't got the text to, unfortunately. But it's a lovely spot to go to, and obviously if you're at all interested in the Bronte sisters, then it's an absolutely kind of essential place to visit, because it's the absolute kind of repository of everything that is kind of special about the family. And of course, Patrick spent his entire working career here at this church, so he's responsible for a great deal of the upkeep, the kind of funding, and it's a wonderful kind of place. So there's Elizabeth Bramwell, who is the auntie. There's another one, I'll talk about her in just a minute. So basically it is ground zero for the Bronte family. They are all, apart from, as I say, Anne, buried in this church. Poem there by Charlotte. Sorry, a bit blurry so you can't really read it. You're very welcome, Polly. As I say, it just adds to it, and hats off to Mark in Amsterdam for having this idea of integrating kind of live footage with pre-recorded. I think it's a great innovation. And so there's the Bronte Bible there. You can see a picture of Patrick next to it. So this was the Bible on the lectern that would have been there in all the church services, reading out. So you're doing his sermon and Bible readings. That's the actual kind of Bronte Bible. Children would have read through it as well. A copy of the marriage certificate there, June 29th in 18, can't see what year it is. The Charlotte Bronte and Arthur Nichols. I think that's Maria, Charlotte, sorry. That's her husband, Mr. Nichols. So, it's a fantastic, it's a fabulous kind of place to come and visit. So, how much of this video is left, but obviously the copies, the originals, will be sort of placed in safekeeping, but it's still fantastic to be able to just get in there and have a look at these handwritten entries that portray names that are just so so famous, it's sort of almost difficult to think of them as sort of regular people. And of course, nobody would have known about the sisters being authors, for reasons we're going to come on to in just a minute. So a few pictures of the church as it was in Patrick's time. So, as I say, the main work, I think this is about the end of this video now, was in the church that I was to. That's the end of that video, so try and get rid of that. Hopefully that worked for you. So the tower you can see here, so it originally dates from the 14th century, but it was extended significantly to build a belfry. So Patrick got some new bells cast, and there's all the bells that are used here today. So there definitely are elements to it. So it's actually open. So I mean, I know the signal will drop as soon as I go into. I'm not going to sort of walk in, but I'll give you a quick little sneaky peek. So that is the interior of the church. So it's absolutely lovely, and the Bronte chapel is just kind of over in front of us here. So, but as I say, if I walk in now, I can tell you now the signal will drop because the stoneware. But that's what the church. It is a good idea, isn't it? As I say, hats off to Mark for innovating there. So all credit where credit is due. He was, I believe, the first to really think about doing that. So. More power to him, and as I say, with a lot of these, it's not just about permissions. You get in these stone buildings, and 4G and stone are not best friends. 4G, with the best one in the world, is made for kind of lightweight, modern, housing, and it passes through those kind of walls that easy. But solid stone can be a very, very different matter indeed. So here is the church tower. The responsibility. Look at that beautiful blue sky there of Patrick Bronte. I'm going to do the same again in a minute inside the parsonage. I've got some footage inside the parsonage as well for you, so you are being spot. So the Parsonage Museum, which is just over here, we're going to look at now, is a kind of writer's house museum, and it's maintained by the Bronte Society in honour of the Bronte sisters, Charlotte, Emily and Anne. And the museum is in the former Bronte family home, the Parsonage in Haworth, West Yorkshire. Just before we sort of go in there, obviously within this there are the Bronte graves, so not so much the members of the family, but people important to them. And I know a Tabby's grave, so we'll look at that. I can find John Brown's grave. That's so we'll see. We'll see if we can find both. So this sort of preservation, this museum, was set up by the Bronte Society, which is one of the oldest kind of literary societies in the English-speaking world. And its members support the preservation of the museum and the library collections. And also, if things come on to the market, at auctions and so forth, they are sufficiently well connected to be able to get the resources to bid for and secure, really important kind of things of memorabilia and so forth, and artefacts. So consequently, as time goes on, this collection becomes even more important. But the thing that's most sort of striking, I suppose, about this is just how dramatic this graveyard is. I mean, it is absolutely stunning. It is the ultimate kind of Gothic graveyard. So the parsonage was built between 1778 and 1779. It's just over there, look, in the distance. And in 1820, Patrick Bronte comes here as the incumbent of the church behind us. And when he arrived at the parsonage, he had his wife with him and 6 children. So as Mitzi mentioned about the 2 young girls, we'll talk about those now, actually. And this was the family home for the rest of their lives. And its moorland setting had a kind of profound influence on the writings of Charlotte, Emily and Anne. Before we finish, I'll take you out and show you the moorlands sort of behind. So Patrick Bronte was actually a published author of poetry and fiction. And so his children grew up not only around books, but being used to seeing the name Bronte in those books. So if you like, they had an early sense of the normal, of being normal, as you might say, to sort of publish books. So just talk a bit about the family now. So Anne was the youngest of the 6 Bronte children, and she was born in January of 1820. And 3 months later, she's quite literally a babe in arms. The family arrive here, so she's 3 months of age. They moved to the 5-roomed Haworth parsonage. And it is a bit spooky, isn't it? And so when Anne is barely a year old, her mother Maria became ill and died, probably with uterine cancer, we believe. So Patrick tried to remarry, this is the father, but without success. So Maria's sister, Elizabeth Bramwell, had come to look after her sister, to kind of nurse her in the final months until weeks and days of her life. She then kind of stayed on and moved into the parsonage. You know, I say she initially come for her sister, but she sort of then becomes, responsible for the upbringing of her sister's children. But she kind of does it from a sense of duty, it would seem. She was kind of stern and expected respect, but not love. There's little affection between her and the older children. But according to tradition, Anne was a favourite. Now, Maria and Elizabeth were the oldest, the firstborn of the Bronte children. They'd been sent away to school, but both of them contracted and died from tuberculosis, very kind of close together. And so as a result of that, Patrick decided that from this point onwards he was going to educate the children from home. And it seems that this was a really kind of key decision that he made, because it increases the isolation of the children having to look to themselves for their own entertainment rather than to mixing with outsiders. So the bleak moors surrounding the Haworth become the playground of these children. Their aunt had tried to kind of teach the girls how to run households, but they inclined more towards literature. They read much from their father's kind of well-stocked library, and their reading fed their imaginations. Their creativity soared after their father gave Branwell a set of toy soldiers in 1826. They gave names to soldiers and developed their characters. And this led to the creation of an imaginary world, the African kingdom of Angria, which was illustrated with maps and watercolour renderings. And the children devised plots about the inhabitants of Angria and its capital city, Glasstown. The characters and lands created by the children were given newspapers and magazines and chronicles written on tiny books with writing so small it was difficult to read without a magnifying glass. I haven't got a picture of that. I should have brought one, but I'm sure many of you will be familiar, if not Google, the Bronte children's books. They're incredible, really small, much smaller than the palm of your hand, tiny writing. And this is kind of feel like the apprenticeship for their later literary talents. So we've got here a grave of somebody who was very important to the family. This is the grave of Tabitha Ackroyd. So I'll just bring you over here so you can see also Tabitha Ackroyd of Haworth, who died in 1855. So almost nothing is known of Tabitha or Tabby Ackroyd's life before she entered the parsonage, but we know she arrived here in 1824. She was aged 53, so she was born around 1771. Almost certainly a native of Haworth, and Tabby was the cook housekeeper, and for the first 15 of her 31 years at parsonage, the only servant living in. Although the Bronte sisters themselves cooked, cleaned and washed clothes. So consequently she was looking after them. So just to show you here, so this is the site of the gate leading to the church used by the Bronte family, through which they were carried to their final resting place in the church. So both in life and in death they used the gate here from the parsonage. Just spin round, a little 360 for you, the church kind of just behind us. So in December 1836 Tabby slipped on ice in Haworth's Main Street, which you'd imagine would have been very, very treacherous, and she badly broke her leg. So Aunt Bramwell suggests that she should leave the parsonage to be nursed by her sister Susanna, but the children objected, and they even went on hunger strike, and so Tabby stayed in the parsonage, nursed by the children. However, over the next sort of few years, 3 years, Tabby's duties were mainly taken up by Emily, because she simply was immobile. And now in 1839, Tabby appears to have retired temporarily, moving into a house nearby that she bought with a widowed sister. So as a result of this, Mr. Bronte engaged Martha Brown's 11-year-old daughter, the daughter of his sexton, John Brown. But the greater part of the skilled and heavy work fell upon the Bronte girls, with Emily, in effect, becoming the housekeeper. But in 1842, Tabby moved back to the parsonage, where she stayed, sharing a little servant's bedroom with the young Martha for the next 13 years. So I've got a little bit of footage from within the house. So again, let's hope that we can kind of play this. I'll keep sort of talking while you have a look at inside the Parsonage Museum. Obviously Patrick Bronte studied there. So according to Mrs. Gaskell, Tabby abounded in a strong practical sense and shrewdness. Her words were far from flattery, but she would spare no deeds in the cause of those who she kindly regarded. So in other words, she was very loyal and supportive of those that she liked. So Mrs. Bronte had been dead for 3 years when Tabby came to the parsonage, and the children were looked after by their mother's sister, Elizabeth Bramwell. A year after Tabby's arrival, when the two eldest girls, Marie and Elizabeth, died, Charlotte and Emily found a physical and emotional warmth in the kitchen rather than that in a more formal relationship with their Aunt Bramwell. So Tabby is really important. She's the heartbeat, the warmth, the love that's in this house comes from in the kitchen here, sat around the fire with Tabby. It's not in the formal reading rooms where Patrick is writing his sermons, where the aunt is doing her embroidery and so forth. It's in the kitchen, a really important place. So Tabby was fond of her children, as she called them, and Charlotte said she was like one of the family. Tabby took the girls for walks on the moors in their old-fashioned ways and a broad Haworth accent, was sometimes the butt of their boisterous games, but she was a great storyteller. She knew all the local families and their complex interrelationships and disputes, and despite her belief in Christian teachings of divine reward and retribution, she also kind of held on to some ancient traditions of the countryside, claiming to have known people who'd seen fairies. So this idea of imagination and getting out on the moors and there being a wildness is introduced to them by this child, by this storyteller they all kind of dote upon. And they're working alongside her in the kitchen. She's telling them these stories, or maybe she sat down because she can't really stand up for so long. But they're soaking it all up with little sponges. We see the signs of the pews there from within the church. So kind of Tabby's influence permeates the landscape of Wuthering Heights. So Tabby is almost certainly the model for Nellie Dean in Wuthering Heights, and for the housekeeper Martha in Charlotte's home, Charlotte's novel Shirley. So Tabby died on February the 17th, 1855. We saw her grave a second ago there. And she's buried with her sister Susanna and George Ackroyd, who was her brother, so just over the wall from the Bronte parsonage. There's Charlotte's dress, tiny shoes. So a really great collection inside, obviously, of the clothes that were there. So that's Charlotte's room that you're looking at there. And various scarves. Wonderful colours, really well kind of preserved. It's amazing kind of the quality of kind of what is in there. Charlotte taking the job as a teacher in 1835, and she actually took Emily with her to the school to become a pupil. But Emily suffered terribly. I think that's Emily's room, if I remember rightly, from home sickness. And within months she returned home. And this seems to be a kind of characteristic of the children. No matter how much effort they put into going away, they all just kind of came back like little boomerangs. They ended up back inside the parsonage. So Anne then went off with Charlotte to see if she could do any better. That was her first taste of life away from home, and she stayed away for 2 years. So there's the picture of the three sisters and Bramwell, and the last few bits of furniture. I think this video is coming towards an end. Picture of Bramwell there and this is the chap who basically from Pennsylvania, who was the big mover and shaker of making the society happen. So somebody from the USA, from Pennsylvania, was absolutely kind of crucial in acquiring the house and the collections, and so he was very much the kind of mainstay. So we see bits of fabric, purses, bags and so forth from Charlotte's collection. She certainly was very fashionable. She also had some stuff there you see from Native American tribes she's interested in. Not quite sure how she'd come across that, but she's interested in the Wild West. But also contemporary fashions of the day, swatches, various kind of fabrics and dresses, fabric there for clothes that were kind of never made. So we hear about the original arrival of Aborigines into Bradford. So she was fascinated in other cultures. So again, you can find these within the house. So if you haven't been, it is well worth a visit to the parsonage. I think we're coming to the end of this video, and we'll then come back to the story of the sisters. So ribbons. So again, this is Charlotte's collections, are worn by Charlotte Bronte. See her dresses. I think that's it. Oh no, it's a little bit more to go. So we've got designs. Some of them just obviously survived. Others just got the designs for. But it's a fabulous collection, and it is growing all the time. So as you can say, as things come onto the market for auction and so forth, they will do their level best to secure them for this kind of collection. So it's It's a brilliant collection, and congratulations to everybody involved within it. So, Anne has a go at living away. Does slightly better than Emily. She was at 15, but she's 2 years before she's going to be returning home. But she's a very studious girl, Anne. However, she takes ill with gastritis in December 1837. And so that's what brings her back. And there's also apparently a clash with her religious teacher over her ideas about kind of faith. In 1839, she took a job as a governess in the home of a wealthy family. But she found, this is Anne, the children unruly and impossible to teach. But she was also prevented from employing any form of discipline by the family. So she left in December 1839, returned to the parsonage, where she found Charlotte, Emily and Bramwell had all just left the jobs, and the four once more united. So Anne tells the story of going in Agnes Grey. If you've read Agnes Grey, you're familiar with it. That's the story of a governess. So that's the story of Anne's first kind of foray and experience outside the parsonage. Agnes Grey falls deeply in love with a kindly character called Edward Weston, and it's believed that Weston is based on William Wakeman, Patrick Bronte's new curate that Anne met on her return to Haworth. And it's believed that William and Anne became very close, but tragically he then dies of cholera the same year, and Anne is believed to have expressed grief for his death in her poem I Will Not Mourn Thee, Lovely One, in which she called him our darling. So between 1840 and 1845, Anne works again as a governess, this time at a house near York. And it was a much more suitable role. She found happiness there. And she accompanied the family each year on their annual holidays to Scarborough. She spent about 5 weeks per year here over the summer and loved it. And in 1843, Anne secured a position for Bramwell with her employees. But Bramwell was a bit of an idiot, really. And unfortunately, he blew it. She had this great job. He brought her in, and he ends up having an illicit affair with the lady of the house, named Lydia Robinson. And of course, when this is discovered, they're both put out of the house. So Bramwell was sacked, and Anne follows him. But the following year, Anne has her first poem published under the name of Acton Bell, because, of course, at this time, there was no real opportunity for women to publish under their kind of names. And in July of 1846, a package containing the manuscripts of each sister's first novels were making their way around the London publishers. And they were actually sent, I'm just going to show you where, because the post office is just over here, so I'm going to bring you back down. You might pop back in afterwards. But just to kind of show you, because it's a lovely thought of imagining these, obviously children that have become, kind of expert in creating these worlds, eventually move on to kind of adult literature. Each had written their first novel. So those first novels were The Professor by Anne, The Professor by Charlotte, Agnes Grey by Anne, and Wuthering Heights by Emily. So these are the kind of the first novels that are written, and they were sent down to publishers at the old post office, which is just down here. So this is the Haworth old post office, this little building you're looking at right in front of you. So this is where the girls came and bundled together their manuscripts, posted them off down to London. But of course they used the names of men. They were Ellis, Acton and Currer Bell. So Charlotte written The Professor, Emily written Wuthering Heights, and Anne had written Agnes Grey. But after some rejections, Wuthering Heights and Agnes Grey were accepted by the publisher Thomas Courtly Newby. The Professor was rejected. In fact, it only was published after the death of Charlotte. But by this stage, Charlotte was completing her second, but what was to be her most famous novel, which of course was Jane Eyre. And Jane Eyre was accepted immediately by Smith, Elder & Co. It was the first published of the sisters' novels, and a resounding and immediate success. So Jane Eyre exploded on the literary scene in October of 1847. It was the first book by Charlotte Bronte published under the name of Currer Bell. And it was immediately apparent this was a new novel, was a kind of radical departure from what had come before. And everyone was asking, who is Currer Bell? It was both a critical and a commercial success. It was followed by two further novels from another publisher, Wuthering Heights by Ellis Bell and Agnes Grey by Acton Bell. And their arrival stimulated even more fascination. How were these three authors related? Were they men or were they women? They seemed to know how women thought and felt. Yet they showed the brutalising influence of unchecked passion and far too much knowledge of debauchery and wickedness for them to be ladies. Many thought it was one author. Perhaps the truth is that the wildness of the landscape had sculpted the works. So, if you haven't read any of the Brontes' works, I strongly encourage you to do so. They're not difficult reads. And, Wuthering Heights in particular, great page-turners, as is Jane Eyre. But they are very much studies of the state of the female, how women think, how they respond. But they also bring up subject matters that were incredibly controversial. So, for instance, Anne's second and final book, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, is about a woman who is escaping domestic violence, an abusive marriage, and comes off and tries to be an author and an artist. She's the tenant of the Wildfell Hall. And this was at a time where women were expected basically to suck it up, to suffer in silence. So not only to talk about it, but to have a novel written about it, this was very, very controversial indeed. Now, of course, it's published so-called by a man, but then the men are thinking, well, why would a man write about the kind of bestial nature of some men, of how they kind of treat women so savagely and inappropriately? So it was very, and of course, with Mr. Rochester, we've got, Mrs. Rochester being trapped in the attic, so we've got the kind of the state of, a woman who's mental illness, obviously an embarrassment. In the case of Heathcliff and Cathy, we've got, a murder story, we've got, Wild Man of the Moor, Heathcliff. So where men are portrayed, often they're bestial, they're hypocritical, they are brutal, they are insensitive, whereas the women are kind of thoughtful, supportive, kind of collegiate. And it really is, the first stirrings, if you like, Joe, of feminist literature. So I'd say if you haven't read them, or even if it's just the ones like Agnes Grey or Shirley, these are kind of about being governesses and being teachers, but also about the limitations of what you could and couldn't do, the almost suffocating sort of nature. And of course, being educated and not really being properly employed, the children all drift back, so that they're writing the books, but at the same time they're teaching here. So Patrick opened the schoolroom here. So this is the schoolroom of Haworth to educate the children. And Charlotte, Bramwell, Emily and Anne all taught here. This was Charlotte's wedding reception in 1854, so married in the church there. The wedding reception was here. So everything was happening here. This isn't like one of these locations of so-and-so was born here. Everything of note happened within, literally, this tiny village. It is a kind of remarkable kind of encapsulation of everything about the Brontes to be found here. So this was the wedding reception. So they were teaching the children here. So at least this allowed them to have, modest forms of income. Because, of course, at the time, nobody knew who they were. And, of course, once the publishers kind of found out, they weren't at all keen to pay over royalties because they felt that they'd been sort of shortchanged. So it wasn't a case that money was made quickly out of this. It really wasn't the case. Tenant of Wildfell, absolutely amazing for time, absolutely. So, you've then obviously got, Emily, I believe it's Emily, I think, is the first of the daughters to die. I think she's about 29 when she dies of TB. Anne succumbs the following year, refused really to kind of get medication support. She dies, I think she's aged 31. Charlotte is the eldest survivor. She makes it all the way to 39. But none of the Bronte children, none of the 6 Bronte children make it to 40. So, they don't really do that much better than the average of this awful kind of death toll of this village. And it's because they were living in deeply insanitary conditions, and their sort of bodies would steadily be weakened by this exposure to all this awful stuff, within the water supply. So gradually, one by one, they die, and it's only shortly before, it's after Emily and Anne have died, that they become sort of celebrities, you might say, and people start to become aware that they are sisters and sort of females. So Charlotte is the one, if you like, that at best gets some form of celebrity, but of course she dies, and so it's all posthumous. The legend, if you like, the cult of the Brontes starts with Mrs. Gaskell's The Life of Charlotte Bronte, which is published in 1857. So by that stage they're all dead. So it's kind of fascinating to kind of think about, despite the fact, obviously, people are aware of these novels sort of scandalised, they don't realise it's the Bronte sisters. It's only actually when they're all dead that this story begins to come out, and there's this idea of these women that are just uncouth, that are different, that just don't accept the Victorian kind of mindset, as you might say, that puts conditions on what it means to be a woman in terms of what you can and can't say, what you should and shouldn't put up with, what you're able to do in terms of kind of professions. The Brontes blow it wide open, because not only do they say a woman can do what a man can do, they also point to the fact that men are often very deeply flawed and carry an awful lot of baggage of their own importance, where actually women are every bit, if not more, capable than men at doing these jobs which at that time they weren't able to do, they were kind of shut off from. So they really kind of kick up a stink, these sisters, but of course it's all happening after they've died. It's only sort of posthumously when people always doing a post-mortem in their lives trying to work out, how did this happen? How did they come to have this mindset, this kind of this approach? That then, of course, they start to look at the place, the landscape. We start to get these stories of Tabby, Tabby, who's the servant. They're taking them up and out onto the moors. And I thought I'd just sort of finish up a few more minutes yet, so to take you for a little view up on the moors. I don't want the signals to be like up here, so we're not going to go too far. But just to show you quite how close the parsonage is, obviously a bit of a building site here in a minute, is to the moorland. It is synonymous. Trying to get this heaps out of the way. Into your picture. It is absolutely one. So we've got the Bronte waterfall is sort of over the brow of that hill. It's in that kind of direction. About 25 minutes walk over that way. Going in that direction, in the valley, you've got Top Withens, which is about half an hour's walk. And Top Withens is the setting, we believe, for Wuthering Heights. So that is where Cathy and Heathcliff live. So Top Withens is an abandoned ancient sort of farmhouse. Now it's much smaller than Wuthering Heights is described in the book, but nonetheless it's kind of believed to be the sort of setting. And we know that the Bronte chair and the waterfall, which just says about 20 minutes or so in that direction, was where they'd gone on almost daily basis. And bearing in mind that right now obviously it's a nice summer evening, it's all dry, but imagine getting out here in all weathers. This really would have been I think an incredibly kind of very, very, very challenging place. Hello? Yeah. So, if I'm loud enough, you'll understand. Sound's gone. Is it back on now? Let's I think the sound should have come back on now. My microphone had slipped off, so just let me know if you can hear it. So Mitch can hear the wind on the moors, so I think the sound has probably come back. Yeah, about it. Yeah, I just noticed the microphone had just gone off, so I just rebooted it. I'm not quite sure why it went off. Thank you. Good. Let's have a wander back down through the village, and we'll have a look in the windows now, and just kind of take in the Cathy come home now. Absolutely. Taking the shop windows, obviously, on the way up, we were looking at. We were talking about all things Brontes. So let's just have a look and see the sort of fun, funky shops and stuff that's en route. So it's absolutely delightful. So I do hope you enjoyed that sort of potted little biog of the Brontes. But I say what's fascinating is really it's everything is in the legacy. Is nobody ever really got to ask questions of the Brontes. They were never interviewed. There was never an opportunity to say why did you come out with all this stuff. But across I think there's 7 books. Let me see if I remember. So you've got Jane Eyre is the first one that Charlotte writes, and then Shirley and Valotte, but then Professor is done posthumously, so that's 4. You've then got Anne writes Agnes Grey and Ten at Wellford Hall, so that's 2, so that's 6, and then Wuthering Heights, yeah. So there's only 7 books, all written in a very, very short period of time, and most people would have read these books after the sister died. Do you think there's something sort of really kind of strange about it, of thinking, probably people discovered it and they finally found out the women were been so inspired and would have loved to have, gone to festivals and listened to being interviewed, but they're all gone. How long did they fall? Now, interesting question that, Leslie. Patrick Bronte lives a long life. He actually lives right the way I think, is it the 1861. So there's Patrick Bronte's years, look. 1771 to 1861. So 4 years, I believe, after the death, or 5 years after the death of his eldest child, Charlotte. Yeah, so Charlotte here, look. So Charlotte is 1816 to 1855. So I say it's almost like a sort of literary will-o'-the-wisp. No sooner had people realised the gravity and magnitude of their artistic endeavours and contribution to the novel, but also to the voice of women in it, and they'd gone. And I think that makes it even more sort of dramatic, romantic, whatever you want to call it, so that, the ghost of Cathy is as much the ghost of Emily Bronte, because she's gone. I mean, obviously she'd have died by now anyway. So, but I mean, at that time, and she'd written this as an 18-year-old. They were incredibly young, but at the same time, they produced this astonishing maturity and different ways of thinking about how you could portray particularly female characters, which hadn't really been the focus. The major authors of the day, Charles Dickens, for instance, his male characters with Nancy, I suppose, in Oliver Twist, Sarah Gamp, and they're often a bit larger than life and a bit sort of silly and idiosyncratic. He doesn't really give women a great deal to do in most of his books. They're very male. So by contrast, if you want to understand what it was like to be a woman living in the first half of the 19th century in the industrial north, then any of those books will give you a brilliant sense of what women could and couldn't do, their expectations upon them, and so forth. So it really is a fantastic opportunity to, if you want us peek in a church to open. But I say, I think the 4G in here is. There you go. I thought it was. So yeah, there's the Bronte Chapel. The Bible and stuff I showed you earlier. So I think I'll put a contribution on behalf of everybody. And we'll head on out. So I'll just walk us down the hill. So beautiful stained glass up at the back here. As you can see, it's a Belgian glass, that's absolutely delightful. And some lovely glass. And we'll just say, my car's at the bottom, so I'm going to walk down the hill, so we might as well walk down together. There's live, rarefied atmosphere. It's lovely, isn't it? Yeah. What's fantastic, of course, is that everything around here tends to date from the second half of the 18th century. Most of the buildings, 1750s, 60s, 70s, 80s. This streetscape, this landscape, is precisely how it would have been in the time that the Bronte children were living here, the Bronte family were living here. So we don't have to imagine what it was like for the Brontes living here. This is what it was like for the Brontes living here. All right, the shop fronts are different, selling different things, no doubt, but it is. Susan, do have a go. Maybe start with Wuthering Heights. That's a great one to start with. It's a real page turner. We'll get away with these noisy doggies that obviously want to be on telly. Look at that lovely old till. Isn't that fantastic? And antibiotics, of course, you're absolutely right there. So yeah, I mean, all these things, antibiotics. If you had to have surgery, things like what do you call it, anaesthetic. If you don't have anaesthetic and put you out, your body's like to die in shock. You know, so all these things, you know, clean water, antibiotics, anaesthetics, they're all kind of key to our ability to kind of survive a serious illness. And once, you know, these things come on stream, the 1850s onwards, the life expectancy sort of really rapidly starts to go up. It's a lovely time to capture. Absolutely great way of talking about it. It's a lovely cabinet of curiosities there, getting ready for all things. So this is, say, the Black Bull. Look at the shop on it. So that was the watering hole of Bramwell. But this is lovely for those that like their experience. They make soups and candles and bath preparations. Isn't that looking awesome and autumnal? Fiona is absolutely, but it's for Halloween, but why not? If you're going to go to this degree of care and attention, why not have it up for a while? So I like that a great deal. I think that's one of my favourite shop fronts in the village. So let's have a walk back down the hill, and again, you just see the light there on the landscape. So it's perfectly set, is this village. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to lie, from an accessibility point of view, it's not great. Obviously, if you had maybe a powered chair for those that have got mobility issues, you might manage it. But to be honest, of all places in Yorkshire, this is not somewhere I'd advise if you do have mobility issues. But if you can manage it, Catherine was here. You know, it is fabulous. There's nowhere else kind of quite like it. A little celebration here for virtual women. We were talking about that in the Tanzaville tour, weren't we, the other week. So 100-year celebration. So I think that was a few years back, wasn't it? So obviously like it so much they've kept that decoration. But lots of really interesting owner Jenna. And there's an interesting coda for those that are interested. If you enjoy Jane Eyre, there is a book by a lady called Jean Rhys. That's Jean R-H-Y-S Rhys. It's called Wide Sargasso Sea, and it's the imagined sequel to Jane Eyre, and it is fabulous. It is absolutely brilliant book. So she only wrote one book, of for most. She only wrote one book for a long time, then maybe wrote another one. But Jean Rhys, one of those great female authors that pops up, writes one book and knocks it out of the park. Just rather nice things in the window. So you know, if you can come and if you can manage it and take your time up. See, that's from poet, probably the best poet of the three as well. Well, by a country mile, she's the best poet of the three. But she's forever frozen in time. She doesn't get to experience more mature. She doesn't have an autumn to reflect back on her years. It's all sort of taken from her. So she's perpetual youth, but this incredible, like sagacity, this incredible wisdom in one so young. But nonetheless, that's it. It's like somebody comes and just switches, pulls the plug, and there's no more Brontes. But anyway, there we go. So I do hope you've enjoyed all things Haworth. I've certainly enjoyed bringing you here. It is a delightful place. I'm not going to lie, as I say, it is uphill all the way. This is probably one of the worst tours for that. I think I've managed reasonably okay to keep the puffing and panting down to a minimum, but I do apologise if heard before, studied Wide Sargasso Sea at uni. All people could talk about was the film. Oh dear. But well worth reading. Well worth reading. So find out about Mrs. Rochester. Mrs. Rochester, The Secret is, it's a good book. Now I've got Whitby. I don't know why I've got Whitby up here, but can't really see that light in there. That's the Whitby Abbey up there, but all sorts of nice things. So thank you, Patty. I'm glad. And it's not the walking, it's the walking and the talking, keeping everything steady while you're going. It is, it's definitely a stamina tour, is this one, but I've absolutely enjoyed being with you. So as you can see here, the sun really catching now the side of the valley. And it's been an absolute pleasure having you with me. So let's, rather than focus on the bins, let me give you a little wave. It's been an absolute delight. I'm going to head home back to York. So apologies for those that tuned in and didn't get to see the carnival or didn't get to see the main part of the carnival the other day. That's going to be coming up very soon. But I've really enjoyed our time together in Haworth. But all good things must come to an end, not least because as you can probably imagine, with my arm stuck out, you know, you're walking around like this, it's quite nice just to be able to put the gimbal down after a while. So my arm is definitely sort of feeling it. So I'm going to say goodbye and thank you, everybody. Don't forget to give it a like, give me a follow. Hello, Grace. Lovely to see you on. I think you said you've been before, haven't you, Grace, to Haworth, I think you said, if I remember saying in the past. So lovely to have you on from Pennsylvania. And yeah, give it a like, give it a follow, subscribe to me if you aren't already, join the Facebook group. Yeah, we're going to see Humphrey now. So I'll these lovely window boxes down here. Sorry, I'm digressing more than a trifle already. But so pretty. So pretty. Herb, yeah. So yeah, welcome everybody that was on. Sorry if I didn't name check you. But of course, it's been an absolute delight. For Susan, for Grace, for Mitzi, for Dawn, for Tish, for Herbie, for KCM. Who else has been on here? Let me just try and say some to us. Sarah Painter has been on, so lovely. Susan O. Fiona, of course, from Northumberland. Rosemary, and Polly, and Patty, and Treese Elliott. Catherine B. Hope you've done some sketches or been inspired to find